"Your gate can't stop me." The woman behind the wheel of the white Cadillac Escalade smiled as she said it. She didn't slow down. She didn't ask permission. She simply rested her SUV against my steel ranch gate as if the property line didn't exist. Behind her sat 5 more vehicles, 2 landscaping trailers, a concrete truck, 3 HOA board members, and nearly a dozen contractors waiting for her signal. The small crowd gathered behind the convoy watched like they were waiting for a parade. I stood on the opposite side of the gate with one hand resting on the old steel post. My father had welded more than 30 years ago. "This is private property," I said calmly. "You've already received 2 trespass notices." Cynthia Vale laughed. "No, Mr. Reed," she pointed toward the line of vehicles behind her. "This is community access. The HOA voted. We're using this road." I looked at the sheriff's deputy standing nearby. He had been dispatched after Cynthia reported that I was blocking emergency access. He hadn't chosen a side. "Not yet, Cynthia," I said. "Are you absolutely sure you want to drive through this gate?" She rolled her eyes. "Your gate can't stop me." Then she pressed the accelerator. The impact echoed across the pasture. Steel groaned. The gate twisted backward. Several contractors cheered. Cynthia smiled. She honestly believed she had just won. What she didn't know was that I'd spent nearly 20 years designing security systems for industrial facilities before retiring to my family's ranch. She thought she'd just forced open an old farm gate. In reality, she had just triggered 4 cameras, 3 independent data loggers, a pressure sensor beneath the driveway, a license plate recognition system, and a cloud backup that had already uploaded everything before her. SUV even crossed my property line. The damage to my gate wasn't what cost Cynthia $80,000. It was everything she said and did after she drove through it. "My name is Mason Reed. I'm 49 years old, and I own just over 900 acres of cattle ranch outside Madison County. People who don't know ranch life often assume a gate is just another fence. It isn't. A ranch gate protects everything behind it: the livestock, the equipment, the water system, the feed storage, the people living there. For me, it also protected memories. My father welded that gate together from reclaimed railroad steel when I was 16. He always believed that if something was worth protecting, it was worth building with your own hands. I still remember the sparks flying through the summer air while he showed me how to weld straight lines. He wasn't teaching me about steel. He was teaching me responsibility. "Son," he'd said, "a locked gate doesn't keep honest people out. It reminds dishonest people where the boundary is." I never forgot that. For nearly 15 years, nobody had a problem with the gate. The county road ended exactly where my property began. Visitors called before coming. Delivery trucks waited for permission. Hunters respected the signs. Even utility crews checked in before entering. Then Willow Ridge Estates was built across the eastern property line. At first, I welcomed the new neighbors. I even attended their first community barbecue. Most of the families were friendly. Many had moved from the city because they wanted quiet evenings, open space, and country living. The problems didn't begin with the residents. They began with the HOA, more specifically its president, Cynthia Vale. "Wooks." She introduced herself during the HOA's first annual meeting. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect posture. She spoke like every sentence had already been approved by a committee. "Our goal," she proudly announced, "is to improve property values while creating a stronger community." Everyone applauded, including me. At the time, I believed her 6 months later. The county announced repairs on the old bridge connecting Willow Ridge to the main highway. The detour added about 12 minutes to everyone's commute. It wasn't convenient, but it was temporary. Apparently, 12 extra minutes was too much for Cynthia. One Tuesday morning, I noticed tire tracks cutting across my ranch road. Fresh tracks, not one vehicle, several the next morning. I watched a landscaping truck drive straight through my gate after someone had cut the chain holding it closed. By Friday, contractors, delivery vans, and even moving trucks were using my ranch as a shortcut. Every vehicle passed within a few hundred feet of my cattle. Every vehicle kicked dust across grazing fields. Every vehicle ignored the large sign that read, "Private ranch, no public access, no easement." I replaced the chain. Someone cut it again. I installed a heavier lock that disappeared too. Finally, I caught Cynthia herself driving through the gate in her white Escalade. I stepped into the road and waved her down. She lowered her window just enough to speak. "You need to stop using this road," she smiled politely. "No, this is the fastest route. It isn't your route." "It is now." I stared at her. "There's no easement." She leaned back in her seat. "Our attorney says there is. I've already checked with the county." She shrugged. "Then your county records are wrong." Before I could answer, she drove around me and continued toward the subdivision. That single conversation told me two important things. First, she had absolutely no intention of stopping. Second, she believed saying something often enough would eventually make it true. She had no idea I'd spent 15 years reading surveys, easements, and county plats before I ever became a rancher. So, instead of arguing, I drove into town, not to hire a lawyer, not yet. I went to the county recorder's office. Because before you prove someone is lying, you make absolutely sure the truth is documented. And buried somewhere inside those county records was the first mistake Cynthia Vale would never recover from. The Madison County Recorder's office hadn't changed much since my father first took me there as a teenager. The same brick walls, the same faded county seal, the same quiet atmosphere where people came looking for the truth instead of opinions, if you wanted to know who actually owned a piece of land. This was where the argument ended. Martha Green still worked behind the records counter. She had spent more than 30 years protecting county property records and knew nearly every ranch, farm, and subdivision by memory. She looked up as I walked in. "Mason Reed, haven't seen you in a while. I wish this were a social visit." She noticed the folder under my arm. "HOA?" I nodded. She sighed before I even answered. "Let's go to the archive room." 10 minutes later, we were standing in front of a large digital property map. Martha typed my parcel number into the county database. 912 acres. Owner, Mason Reed. No liens, no easements, no shared access agreements, no public right-of-way. Exactly what I'd expected then. She zoomed out. The Willow Ridge subdivision appeared beside my ranch. The property line was perfectly clear. My ranch road stopped at my gate. The subdivision road stopped nearly 40 feet away. There was no legal connection between them. So where did they get this idea? I asked. Martha opened another file. A letter had been submitted 6 months earlier by an attorney representing Willow Ridge HOA. The letter claimed the community possessed a historic emergency access route across my ranch. It wasn't a deed, it wasn't an easement, it wasn't a court order, it was simply an opinion, and someone inside the HOA had begun treating that opinion as though it were law. Martha looked at me over her glasses. An attorney can argue almost anything, but arguments don't change ownership. I asked for certified copies of every document connected to my property. The original deed, every recorded survey, the subdivision plat, the county transportation map, the bridge repair plans, even the emergency response routes used by the fire department. An hour later, my truck contained nearly 200 pages of records. Every one of them said exactly the same thing. My ranch road belonged to me. Spruce. Before driving home, I stopped at the sheriff's civil office. Deputy Mark Ellis had responded to Cynthia's complaint that morning. He welcomed me into his office. "I figured I'd be seeing you." I placed the certified county records on his desk. He spent several minutes reading through them without saying a word. Finally, he leaned back. "So there really isn't an easement?" "No, never was." He tapped the survey map. "Then why does the HOA keep talking about emergency access?" I slid another document across the desk, the county bridge repair schedule. "The detour adds 12 minutes, he frowned. "That's it?" "That's it." He shook his head. 12 minutes isn't an emergency. Duras. That afternoon, I mailed Cynthia another certified letter. Inside were copies of the county survey, the deed, the transportation map, and a formal notice prohibiting anyone from entering my ranch without permission. At the bottom of the letter, I wrote one sentence. "There is no recorded easement across my property. Any future entry will be documented as intentional trespass." 3 days later, the green return receipt appeared in my mailbox. Cynthia had personally signed for it, which meant she could never claim she didn't know. Instead of stopping, she escalated. The following Monday, the HOA sent every homeowner an email. According to Cynthia, I was endangering community safety by blocking emergency access. She claimed my gate violated long-standing neighborhood rights. She even announced that the HOA had voted to restore access if I refused to cooperate. Several residents began believing her. Some even stopped to ask why I was making life harder for the neighborhood. I didn't argue with them. Most of them had never seen the county records. They were trusting the person elected to represent them. Exactly as Cynthia hoped. Truce. That evening, one of my security cameras captured something unusual. A black pickup slowly pulled up to the gate. 2 men climbed out carrying measuring tapes. They carefully measured the width of the entrance, photographed the hinges, examined the chain, and wrote notes on a clipboard. They never knocked on my door. They never asked permission. When they left, I zoomed in on the company logo printed on the truck. It belonged to the same contractor building Willow Ridge's new clubhouse. I watched the footage twice, then I made another copy, because people don't measure a gate unless they're already planning how to get through it. Friday morning began like every other day on the ranch. I was feeding cattle before sunrise when my phone vibrated. Motion detected East Gate. I didn't panic over the previous 3 weeks. My cameras had captured plenty of vehicles slowing down at the entrance before turning around. Most people saw the signs. Most people respected private property. I assumed this would be another one of those mornings. It wasn't. I opened the live camera feed. A white Cadillac Escalade sat directly in front of my gate. Cynthia Vale behind her stretched a convoy of vehicles, 2 landscaping trucks, a concrete mixer, 3 pickup trucks pulling equipment trailers, several SUVs belonging to HOA board members. They weren't trying to pass quietly. They were arriving like they owned the place. Sparns. By the time I reached the gate, Deputy Mark Ellis was already there. He had received another complaint. This time, Cynthia claimed, I was illegally blocking an emergency community access road. The deputy looked tired. I was hoping we wouldn't meet again this week, so was I. Cynthia climbed out of her Escalade carrying a folder thick enough to impress someone who didn't know the difference between paperwork and proof. "We're done playing games," she announced. The HOA board voted unanimously. She waved several pages toward the deputy. "We have legal authorization to reopen this access. I didn't even ask to see the documents because I already knew what they weren't. A deed, an easement, a court order. Without one of those, nothing inside her folder mattered." Deputy Ellis turned toward me. "Mr. Reed?" I handed him one sheet of paper, the certified survey Martha had printed 2 days earlier. He compared it with the map Cynthia provided, then he quietly handed her papers back. "Ma'am, this isn't a recorded easement." Cynthia crossed her arms. "Our attorney disagrees." "The county doesn't." Her smile disappeared. For a brief moment I thought the argument might finally end. Instead, she became angry. "Maris, you know what your problem is?" she snapped. "You think because you own a ranch, you get to inconvenience hundreds of families." I answered calmly. "I think property lines matter." She laughed loudly enough for everyone behind her to hear. "No, they mattered 30 years ago. This community is growing. You can't keep pretending this road belongs only to you. It does not anymore." Then, she looked directly at the deputy. "Are you seriously going to let one stubborn rancher block an entire neighborhood, deputy?" Ellis sighed. "I've already explained the county records. This is a civil matter. I'm not ordering anyone through that gate." Cynthia's face hardened. She had expected the deputy to solve her problem. Instead, he had simply refused to solve it for her. "Muras." She climbed back into her SUV. I walked toward the intercom mounted beside the gate. "Cynthia." She rolled down her window. "I'm asking you one last time. Turn around. This is private property. You've received certified notice. You've been given copies of the survey. You've been told there is no easement. If you drive through this gate today, everything that happens afterward will be your responsibility." She smiled. Then she leaned out of the driver's window just enough for everyone behind her to hear. "Your gate can't stop me." Those were the exact words my microphones captured. Crystal clear. Muras. The next few seconds happened almost exactly the way I'd expected. Not because I'd planned for someone to damage my gate, but because I'd planned for someone who believed rules didn't apply to them. Cynthia motioned toward one of the contractors. The man hesitated. "I don't think we should do this. We don't have permission." She pointed toward the chain stretched across the entrance. "Cut it." The contractor looked at Deputy Ellis. The deputy immediately shook his head. "I'm not authorizing that." Cynthia didn't care. She grabbed a pair of heavy bolt cutters from the back of her SUV herself. The cameras recorded everything. Her walking toward the gate, her cutting the chain, her throwing it onto the ground, her climbing back behind the wheel. Then she accelerated. The Escalade slammed into the steel gate with a loud metallic crack. The impact twisted one hinge completely off the post. The gate swung violently backward, striking the front corner of the concrete truck waiting behind her. Steel bent, headlights shattered. Hydraulic lines snapped. No one was injured. But the damage had only just begun. Non-spurse. Instead of stopping, Cynthia drove through the opening she had created. The convoy followed. One trailer clipped nearly 60 feet of livestock fencing. A concrete truck crushed an underground irrigation valve, startled by the noise. 23 head of cattle pushed through the damaged fence and scattered into the neighboring pasture. Deputy Ellis immediately grabbed his radio. "I need additional units. Property damage. Multiple vehicles. Possible criminal trespass. I didn't say a word. I simply looked up at the camera mounted above the gate. The small green light was still blinking, recording. Uploading, saving every second, because the most expensive mistake Cynthia made that morning wasn't driving through my gate. By Monday morning, everyone in Madison County had heard about the ranch gate. Some believed I'd set a dangerous trap. Others believed Cynthia had finally gone too far. The truth was much simpler. Nothing about my gate was hidden. Nothing was dangerous. Everything had been documented, exactly the way the law required. 3 days later, the courthouse held an emergency civil hearing. The courtroom was packed. Homeowners from Willow Ridge filled nearly every seat. Several local reporters stood along the back wall. Representatives from Cynthia's insurance company sat beside 2 attorneys. Even the contractor whose concrete truck had been damaged showed up for the first time since this began. Cynthia looked nervous. She still carried her leather binder, but she no longer smiled. Judge Eleanor Brooks entered the courtroom and looked around. I've reviewed the preliminary reports. This hearing concerns trespass, property damage, and liability. She turned towards Cynthia's attorney. You may begin, the attorney stood confidently. Your Honor, my client believes she was using a lawful emergency access route. The gate malfunctioned. The damage resulted from an unsafe entrance installed by Mr. Reed. He spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Community safety, emergency access, historical use. Good faith, everything except one thing, evidence. My attorney stood next. We'll let the cameras speak. The courtroom lights dimmed. The first video appeared on the screen. A wide-angle view of the ranch entrance. Large reflective signs clearly read, "Private ranch, no public access, no easement." Then another camera angle appeared. The intercom recording played. Everyone heard my voice. Cynthia, this is your final warning. You have no legal permission to enter. Turn around. Seconds later, her answer echoed through the courtroom. Your gate can't stop me. No one said a word. The next camera showed Cynthia walking to the gate with bolt cutters. The timestamp appeared in the corner. The deputy stood only a few feet away. His voice was clearly recorded. I'm not authorizing that. Cynthia ignored him. She cut the chain anyway. Then she climbed back into her Escalade. Another angle showed her accelerating. The impact twisted the gate off its hinge. The convoy followed her straight onto my ranch. Every vehicle, every license plate, every second. Nothing was missing. Wondrous. Then came the footage no one outside my family had seen before. The overhead drone camera, installed years earlier to monitor cattle during calving season. It captured the convoy crossing my pasture after breaking through the gate. One trailer ripped down nearly 60 feet of fencing. The concrete truck crushed the irrigation valve. 23 cattle scattered across neighboring fields. Several contractors climbed out of their trucks, looking completely confused. One of them pointed towards Cynthia. Even without audio, everyone could tell they were arguing. The judge leaned forward, paused the video. The frame froze. The damaged fence, the escaping cattle, the convoy parked on private land. She slowly looked towards Cynthia. Mrs. Vale, at what point did you believe you still had permission to continue? Cynthia couldn't answer. The insurance investigator testified next. He placed a thick claims file on the witness stand. Mrs. Vale reported this incident as an accident occurring on a public access road. He paused. Our investigation found that statement to be false. He held up still images from my cameras. The claimant had already received 2 written trespass notices. She was verbally warned. She acknowledged the warning. She intentionally entered private property. He closed the file. As a result, the policy provides no coverage. A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. Without insurance, the responsibility became personal. Durings. The final witness surprised everyone. It wasn't a police officer. It wasn't another attorney. It was the contractor Cynthia had ordered to cut the chain. He looked exhausted. My crew didn't want to go through that gate. He swallowed hard. I told Mrs. Vale we didn't have permission. What did she say? My attorney asked. He looked directly at Cynthia. She said, if anyone complains, the HOA will pay for everything. The courtroom fell silent. Several HOA board members slowly turned towards Cynthia. For the first time, they realized she had made that promise without ever asking them. Judge Brooks reviewed the evidence for nearly 30 minutes before delivering her decision. The defendant knowingly entered private property after receiving multiple written and verbal warnings. The trespass was intentional. The property damage was foreseeable. The court finds Mrs. Cynthia Vale personally liable. Then she read the itemized judgment, $18,500 to replace the ranch gate and motor. $9,600 for structural repairs, $7,900 for fencing, $6,800 for irrigation damage, $5,400 for recovering livestock, $10,700 in legal costs, $8,900 for engineering inspections, additional statutory penalties for repeated trespass. The total exceeded $80,000. Cynthia lowered her head, but the judge wasn't finished. She looked toward the HOA board. This court also recommends an investigation into whether HOA funds were improperly used to facilitate repeated trespass onto private property. Suddenly, this case wasn't just about a ranch gate anymore. It had become an investigation into the entire HOA. It was doing it after being warned on camera. Not two people still ask me whether I felt satisfied after the judge ordered Cynthia Vale to pay more than $80,000. My answer always surprises them. No. Because the money was never the point. If it had been about money, I would have hired a lawyer the first time she cut my chain instead. I gave her every opportunity to stop. Twice by certified letter, twice in person. Once in front of a sheriff's deputy, she ignored every single warning. By the time we reached the courtroom, she wasn't paying for a broken gate. She was paying for every decision she made after she knew she was wrong. Monkrus. The weeks following the hearing were far more difficult for Willow Ridge than they were for me. The HOA's insurance carrier formally denied coverage. Its attorneys withdrew from representing Cynthia personally. Several contractors filed claims against the HOA after discovering they had been ordered onto private property without legal authorization. Then came the audit. County investigators reviewed nearly 2 years of HOA financial records. What they discovered shocked even longtime residents. Cynthia had approved thousands of dollars in HOA funds for what she called an emergency access improvement project. There had never been an emergency. There had never been legal access. She had spent homeowners' money trying to create a shortcut that only existed in her imagination. Walks. The next HOA meeting was unlike any meeting the community had ever held. For the first time, the clubhouse was completely full, not because residents wanted another neighborhood update. They wanted answers. One homeowner stood and asked the question everyone had been thinking. Did you know we didn't own that road? Cynthia didn't answer. Another resident held up a copy of the county survey. You told us Mr. Reed was lying. Still no answer then. An older veteran who had lived in Willow Ridge since the first homes were built slowly stood. He looked directly at the board. We elected you to protect this neighborhood, not to start fights with our neighbors. The room erupted into applause. Within 20 minutes, the board voted to remove Cynthia as HOA president. 2 other board members resigned before the meeting even ended. A month later, the county completed its investigation. No criminal charges were filed against the homeowners. They had relied on the information given to them. But Cynthia wasn't as fortunate. She was cited for multiple civil violations involving repeated trespass, misuse of HOA funds, and filing false statements during the insurance investigation. Her personal insurance refused to defend her. The judgment remained entirely her responsibility. The white Escalade she had driven through my gate was eventually sold to satisfy part of the court's order. Ironically, the vehicle she believed could force open my property became one of the assets used to pay for repairing it. As for me, I rebuilt the gate exactly the way my father would have wanted. Same heavy steel, same wide entrance, same ranch road. The only difference was what stood beside it. A modern emergency access keypad connected directly to the county fire department. If firefighters, paramedics, or deputies ever needed immediate access, they could open the gate within seconds. The HOA couldn't. Only real emergency responders received authorization, exactly the way the county recommended. Turns out, protecting private property and protecting public safety were never opposites. You just needed people willing to respect both. Several months later, I received an unexpected invitation. The new HOA board asked if I would attend one of their meetings. Not to argue, not to negotiate, to help them develop a written access agreement for genuine emergencies. I accepted. Because the people living in Willow Ridge had never been my enemies. Most of them had no idea what Cynthia had been doing. They simply wanted a safe neighborhood, the same thing I wanted for my ranch. Together, we created an agreement that clearly defined when emergency vehicles could enter my property, who had authority to approve access, and how every entry would be documented. No assumptions, no imaginary easements, no one claiming power they didn't have. Just clear rules based on the law. These days, the gate spends most of its time exactly where it belongs, closed, not because I want to keep good people out. Because good people don't mind opening a gate when they have permission. Sometimes I'll stop my truck near the entrance at sunset and look across the pasture on the other side of the fence. I can see children riding bicycles through Willow Ridge, families walking their dogs, neighbors waving as they pass. There's no anger anymore, only boundaries everyone finally understands. My father used to tell me something every time we repaired a section of fence after a storm. A fence doesn't create respect, it only reveals who already has it. Cynthia believed the strongest thing on my ranch was the steel gate. She was wrong. The strongest thing on my property wasn't the gate or the cameras, or even the court judgment, it was the truth, because a locked gate can be cut, a chain can be broken. Steel can be replaced, but once the truth is recorded, no amount of authority, arrogance, or HOA votes can ever drive through it again. If you've ever dealt with someone who believed your property belonged to them simply because it was convenient, let me know in the comments, would you have stopped Cynthia the first time she ignored the gate, or would you have done exactly what I did and let the evidence tell the story?